My in-laws convinced my husband I was cheating, so he divorced me while I was pregnant with twins. Now, when the truth came out, they all came crawling back begging for forgiveness. Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thanks. This is going to be long, but I need to get this off my chest because I'm being bombarded with messages and I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable. Sorry for any typos. I'm shaking as I write this. Background. I, now 32F, met my ex-husband Jake, 34M, in college. We were together for 8 years, married for 4 of those. I thought we had the perfect relationship. He was kind, funny, and we shared everything. His family seemed to love me at first, or so I thought. Jake's mother, Carol, 58F, always seemed a bit cold, but I attributed it to her being protective of her only son. His father, Robert, 62M, was friendly enough, and Jake has 2 sisters, Emma, 30F, and Sarah, 36F, who I thought I got along with well. For the first few years, everything seemed fine. When things started going wrong. About 6 months into our marriage, I noticed Carol's attitude toward me shifting. She'd make little comments about how I wasn't taking care of Jake properly because he'd lost some weight. He'd started working out and eating healthier. She'd criticize my cooking, my housekeeping, even my career choices. Jake would always defend me, but I could see it wearing on him. The real problems started when I got pregnant with twins 2 years into our marriage. I was thrilled. Jake was over the moon, but Carol's reaction was strange. She seemed almost angry about it. She kept making comments about how we were too young and not financially ready, even though Jake had just gotten a promotion and we'd been trying for a baby. During my pregnancy, Carol became increasingly invasive. She'd show up unannounced, rearrange things in our house, and constantly question my pregnancy choices. She criticized everything from my prenatal vitamins to my choice of doctor. When I mentioned this to Jake, he'd say she was just excited to be a grandmother, but her behavior felt hostile, not excited. The setup. Here's where things get really messed up. About 5 months into my pregnancy, I started receiving strange texts and calls. Someone would call and hang up when I answered. I'd get texts from unknown numbers with messages like, "He knows what you're doing and you can't hide forever." At first, I thought it was some kind of prank or wrong number situation. Then weird things started happening. I'd come home to find things moved around in our house. My laptop would be in different places than where I left it. Jake travels for work sometimes, and these incidents always seemed to happen when he was away. I started feeling paranoid and scared. I tried to talk to Jake about it, but he was dealing with a lot of stress at work and didn't seem to take it seriously. He'd say things like, "You're probably just tired from the pregnancy, or maybe you forgot where you put things." I started doubting myself. The evidence. One day, while Jake was on a business trip, I came home to find a man's jacket in our bedroom that wasn't Jake's. It was expensive, leather, and definitely not something Jake would wear. I was terrified. I called Jake immediately, crying and panicking, telling him someone had been in our house. Instead of comforting me or rushing home, Jake got angry. He accused me of planting the jacket there myself. I was devastated. Why would I do that? Why would I terrify myself when I was alone and pregnant? But Jake had already made up his mind that I was lying. Then photos started appearing. Printed photos left in places where I'd find them, of me with men I didn't recognize. They were clearly doctored, but well done. Photos of me at restaurants, walking with strange men, even one that looked like me kissing someone who definitely wasn't Jake. I was horrified. I tried to show Jake the photos, explaining that they were fake, that someone was doing this to us. But he wouldn't listen. He said I was trying to cover my tracks and that he had his suspicions for a while. This broke my heart because I had never, ever been unfaithful to Jake. I loved him completely. The family turns against me. What I didn't know at the time was that Carol had been feeding Jake poison about me for months. She'd been telling him that I was acting suspicious, that she'd seen me with other men, and that the babies might not be his. She convinced him that my strange behavior, being scared and paranoid because of the harassment, was actually guilt over my supposed affair. Emma and Sarah joined in too. They started treating me coldly at family gatherings. They'd whisper among themselves and stop talking when I entered a room. Sarah even had the audacity to tell me at one family dinner that Jake deserves better and that I should do the right thing and come clean. I was 7 months pregnant with twins, exhausted, scared, and now my husband's entire family was treating me like a pariah. Jake was growing more distant by the day. He started working late more often, wouldn't touch me, and could barely look at me. The confrontation, everything came to a head when I was 8 months pregnant. I woke up one morning to find Jake packing his bags. When I asked him what was happening, he told me he couldn't live with a cheater anymore and that he was filing for divorce. I begged him to listen to me, to consider couples counseling, to think about our babies. I told him I had never cheated, that someone was clearly trying to destroy our marriage, but he was completely convinced of my guilt. The worst part was when he said, "My mother was right about you from the beginning. She said you weren't good enough for me, and she was right. She said you'd break my heart, and you did." That's when I realized this wasn't just about supposed infidelity. This was Carol's plan from the beginning. She never wanted me in her son's life, and she'd orchestrated this entire thing to get rid of me. The divorce. Jake filed for divorce immediately and demanded a paternity test. I was devastated but agreed because I knew the babies were his and hoped it would prove my innocence. The legal proceedings were brutal. Jake's family had convinced him to fight for full custody, claiming I was unstable and unfit to be a mother. They painted me as a cheating, lying, mentally unstable woman who had trapped their son with a pregnancy. Carol even testified in court about my suspicious behavior and obvious guilt. She lied under oath, claiming she'd seen me with other men multiple times. I couldn't afford a good lawyer. Jake had drained our joint accounts and moved back in with his parents, who were funding his legal team. I was living in a tiny apartment, working as much as I could while heavily pregnant with twins and representing myself in court most of the time. The stress was unbelievable. I ended up in the hospital twice during my 8th month due to high blood pressure and pregnancy complications. Jake didn't even visit me. His family spread rumors that I was faking the medical issues for sympathy. The birth. I gave birth to my beautiful twins, Lily and Lucas, alone. I had called Jake when I went into labor, hoping he'd want to be there for his children's birth, but he didn't answer. Later, I found out he was at his sister Emma's birthday party, which his family had planned specifically on my due date. The babies were perfect and healthy. They looked exactly like Jake, which I hoped would make him realize they were his. But when he finally came to the hospital 3 days later, he barely looked at them. He just demanded the paternity test be done immediately. The paternity results. Of course, the test proved that Jake was 100% the father of both twins. I thought this would be the end of the nightmare, that he'd realize he'd been wrong and we could work things out. I was so naive. Instead of apologizing, Jake doubled down. He claimed that just because the babies were his didn't mean I hadn't cheated. He said I was lucky the right man got me pregnant. His family supported this twisted logic completely. Carol actually had the nerve to say that I'd probably cheated with multiple men and just got lucky that Jake was the father. The mental gymnastics these people were doing to avoid admitting they destroyed an innocent woman's life was staggering. Life as a single mother. The divorce was finalized when the twins were 6 months old. Jake got every other weekend visitation, which he rarely used. I was awarded minimal child support because Jake had hidden assets with his family's help and claimed his income was lower than it actually was. I was completely alone with newborn twins, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and dealing with severe postpartum depression from the trauma of everything that had happened. I had no family support. Jake's family had turned all our mutual friends against me with their lies, and I was barely surviving. The twins and I lived in a tiny, rundown apartment in a bad neighborhood because it was all I could afford. I was working at a grocery store during the day and cleaning offices at night. I dropped the babies at a discount daycare that I wasn't entirely comfortable with, but it was my only option. Jake would show up for his visitation weekends maybe once a month, and when he did, he'd criticize everything about how I was raising the children. He'd say their clothes weren't nice enough because I bought them at thrift stores, their toys weren't educational enough because I couldn't afford expensive learning toys, and that I looked tired and stressed because I was working 16-hour days to keep us afloat. The community destruction. Carol had done a thorough job destroying my reputation in our small town. She'd told everyone at her church, her book club, her yoga class, and anywhere else she went that I was a cheating whore who tried to trap her innocent son with another man's babies. People I'd known for years would cross the street to avoid me. Mothers at the daycare would whisper and point. I lost several job opportunities because the rumors had spread so far. One potential employer actually told me during an interview that they'd heard about my character issues and didn't think I'd be a good fit for their family-oriented business. I couldn't even go to the grocery store without facing judgment and whispers. The twins and I became pariahs in our own community, all because of Carol's lies and manipulation. My lowest point, when the twins were about 18 months old, I had what I can only describe as a complete breakdown. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours in a row for months. I was barely eating, and the stress was literally killing me. I ended up fainting at work and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors said I was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from exhaustion. They wanted to keep me for observation, but I couldn't afford to miss work or pay for childcare. I discharged myself against medical advice and went back to my nightmare life. That night, I seriously considered whether my children would be better off without me. I thought about how maybe Jake's family was right. Maybe I was a terrible mother. Maybe everyone would be happier if I just disappeared. It was the darkest moment of my life. But looking at my beautiful babies, who looked so much like their father, I realized I couldn't give up. They deserved better than what I was giving them, and I was the only one who could provide it. That night, I made a decision that changed everything. The turning point, I decided to leave town. I had nothing keeping me there except pain and harassment. I used what little money I had saved to move 3 states away to a city where no one knew me or my story. It was terrifying to start over with 2 toddlers and no support system, but it was also liberating. I found a small apartment in a decent neighborhood and got a job as a receptionist at a law firm. The attorney, Mrs. Rodriguez, was kind and understanding about my situation as a single mother. She let me bring the twins to work sometimes when my babysitter fell through and even helped me apply for assistance programs I didn't know existed. Slowly, my life started improving. The twins were thriving in their new environment, away from the toxic drama. I was sleeping better, eating regularly, and for the first time in years, I felt hope. Building a new life. Over the next 2 years, I worked my way up at the law firm. Mrs. Rodriguez became my mentor and helped me start taking paralegal courses. I was good at the work and found it fulfilling. The twins started preschool and made friends. We had a small but comfortable life. I also started therapy to deal with all the trauma from Jake and his family. My therapist helped me understand that what they'd done to me was emotional abuse and manipulation. She helped me rebuild my self-worth and confidence. I met other single mothers in our new community who became like sisters to me. We supported each other, babysat each other's kids, and created the family network I'd been missing. For the first time since before my marriage fell apart, I was genuinely happy. Jake's attempts at contact. Jake had my phone number but rarely used it except to complain about not seeing the kids enough. I'd offered multiple times to facilitate video calls or longer visits if he wanted to travel to see them, but he never took me up on it. He seemed content to pay his minimal child support and ignore his children's existence. The twins, now 3 and 4, rarely asked about their father. They had stable, loving lives and didn't seem to miss what they'd never really had. I told them age-appropriate information about having a daddy who lived far away, but I never spoke negatively about Jake in front of them, despite everything he'd put us through. My professional success. By the time the twins were 4, I had completed my paralegal certification and was making a decent salary. We moved to a better apartment, the kids were in a great daycare program, and I was even starting to date again, though cautiously. Mrs. Rodriguez offered me a position as a senior paralegal with her firm, which came with excellent benefits and the opportunity to continue my education. She'd become like a mother figure to me and often said she was proud of how far I'd come. I was also taking evening classes toward a business degree. My goal was to eventually start my own consulting firm. The shy, broken woman who'd fled town with 2 babies was becoming a confident, successful professional. The truth comes out. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. When the twins were 5, I received a call from Emma, Jake's sister. I almost didn't answer because I hadn't heard from any of Jake's family in over 3 years. Emma was crying and could barely speak coherently. She kept saying, "I'm so sorry," and "we were so wrong" over and over. Finally, she managed to tell me that Carol was dying of cancer and had confessed everything on what she thought was her deathbed. According to Emma, Carol had admitted that she'd orchestrated the entire thing that destroyed my marriage. She'd hired a private investigator to follow me and create the fake photos. She'd had someone break into our house to plant evidence. She'd been making the threatening phone calls herself, disguising her voice. Carol had been obsessed with breaking up my marriage from the moment Jake proposed. She'd convinced herself that I was going to steal her son away from the family, and that I wasn't good enough for him. She'd spent months planning how to destroy me and had manipulated Jake's emotions expertly to turn him against me. The most sickening part was that Robert, Emma, and Sarah had all known. They hadn't planned it, but Carol had told them what she was doing, and they'd all agreed to go along with it because they thought it was for Jake's own good. They'd all lied in court, spread rumors in the community, and watched me suffer, knowing I was completely innocent. Emma told me that Carol had only confessed because she thought she was dying and wanted to clear her conscience. But then she'd survived the medical crisis and begged the family not to tell Jake or me the truth. She was terrified of losing Jake's love and facing legal consequences for what she'd done. Jake learns the truth. Emma said she couldn't live with the secret anymore and had told Jake everything despite Carol's protests. Jake had apparently had a complete breakdown when he learned what his family had done. He'd been carrying guilt about our divorce for years, especially about missing the twins' early years, but had convinced himself he'd made the right choice. Learning that I'd been completely innocent, that his family had destroyed an innocent woman's life and kept him from his children based on lies, had shattered him. Emma said he'd been calling my old number for weeks, trying to reach me, not knowing I'd moved. She gave me Jake's current number and begged me to call him. She said he was desperate to apologize and make things right. She also said that Robert and Sarah wanted to apologize too, and that they were all willing to do whatever it took to fix what they'd broken. I thanked Emma for telling me the truth and hung up. Then I sat in my car in my office parking lot and cried for an hour. Not tears of sadness, but tears of vindication. After all these years, I finally had proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the harassment, that I was the victim, not the villain. Jake's attempts to reconnect. Jake started calling and texting constantly. His messages were long, rambling apologies filled with self-hatred and desperate pleas for forgiveness. He said he understood if I never wanted to see him again, but begged for a chance to be in the twins' lives properly. He offered to pay back child support, to cover all the expenses I'd incurred raising the children alone, to pay for therapy for all of us. He said he'd quit his job and move to our city if that's what it took. He was throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. The messages were honestly pathetic. This grown man, who had once looked at me with such disgust and contempt, was now groveling and begging for scraps of forgiveness. Part of me felt satisfied that he was finally suffering like I had, but mostly I just felt empty about it. My response: I didn't respond to Jake's messages for 2 weeks. I needed time to process everything and figure out what I wanted to do. I talked to my therapist extensively about the situation and how to handle it in a way that was healthy for me and the twins. Finally, I sent Jake a single text message. I know the truth now. I need time to decide what, if anything, I want to do about it. Do not contact me again until I reach out to you. If you try to find me or show up uninvited, I will get a restraining order. He replied immediately, promising to respect my boundaries and wait for me to contact him. He said he understood he had no right to demand anything from me and that he was grateful I was even considering letting him explain. Carol's reaction. About a month later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Carol. She'd somehow gotten my new number and was calling to set the record straight. Instead of apologizing, she tried to justify what she'd done. She said she'd been protecting her son, and that even though the evidence was fake, she knew in her heart that I was wrong for Jake. She said that our divorce had actually been for the best because Jake was happier now. When I pointed out that Jake was miserable and had missed years of his children's lives, she said that was his own fault for feeling guilty about nothing. She said the twins were better off without a father who was weak enough to be manipulated. I realized that Carol wasn't really sorry at all. She was only upset that her plan had backfired and turned Jake against her. She still believed she'd been right to destroy my life. She just regretted getting caught. I recorded that phone call, by the way. I learned to protect myself. The twins' questions. As the twins got older, they started asking more questions about their father. They wanted to know why he didn't live with us, why he didn't call them, why other kids' daddies came to school events but theirs didn't. I'd always been honest with them in age-appropriate ways, telling them that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and that their daddy lived far away but loved them. I never wanted them to feel rejected or unloved because of their father's choices. But now that I knew the truth, I struggled with how much to tell them. They deserved to know their father wanted to be in their lives, but I also didn't want to disrupt the stable, happy life we built. They were thriving, confident, well-adjusted kids, and I was terrified of introducing chaos and disappointment into their world. My decision. After months of consideration, therapy, and soul-searching, I decided to give Jake one chance to explain himself and apologize properly. Not because I owed him anything, but because I needed closure and the twins deserved to know their father if he was genuinely committed to being in their lives. I arranged to meet Jake at a neutral location, a coffee shop in a city halfway between where we both lived. I drove 4 hours to meet the man who had destroyed my life 6 years earlier. The meeting. Jake looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had gray in his hair that hadn't been there before, and looked like he hadn't slept in months. When he saw me, he immediately started crying and apologizing. He said he knew there was no excuse for what he'd done, for believing lies about me instead of trusting the woman he'd promised to love and protect. He said the guilt was eating him alive and that not knowing his children was the biggest regret of his life. He told me he'd cut contact with his family after learning the truth, except for Emma, who had been the one to tell him. He said he couldn't forgive his parents and Sarah for what they'd done, and that he'd told them they were dead to him. Jake offered to sign over all parental rights if I wanted him to, saying he understood if I couldn't trust him around the children after what he'd done. He also gave me a check for $50,000, saying it was back child support and that he'd continue paying whatever amount I thought was fair. But what he wanted most was a chance to know his children and to prove that he could be the father he should have been from the beginning. My conditions. I told Jake that if he wanted any relationship with the twins, it would be entirely on my terms. He would have no legal rights or input into their upbringing until he proved himself over a long period of time. He would start with video calls, then supervised visits, and only gradually earn more time with them if he proved consistent and reliable. I also told him that the twins were happy and stable, and if he did anything to disrupt that, he'd be out of their lives permanently. No second chances, no excuses. Their well-being came before his desire for redemption. He agreed to everything immediately. He said he understood he had to earn the right to be their father and that he was grateful for any chance at all. Introducing the twins. I spent several weeks preparing the twins for the possibility of meeting their father. I explained that their daddy lived far away but wanted to talk to them on the computer. They were excited but not overly so, which showed me how well adjusted they were to their current life. The first video call was awkward but sweet. Jake cried through most of it, but the twins warmed up to him quickly. They showed him their toys, told him about school, and asked him simple questions like where he lived and what his favorite color was. Over the following months, Jake was consistent with the video calls. He never missed one, always showed up on time, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know his children. The twins started looking forward to talking to their daddy on the computer. The first visit, after 6 months of regular video calls, I agreed to let Jake visit in person. He flew to our city and stayed in a hotel. We met at a park where the twins could play while we talked. Seeing Jake with his children in person was emotional for me. They looked so much like him, and he was clearly overwhelmed by getting to hug them for the first time since they were babies. He was gentle and patient with them, letting them warm up to him at their own pace. The twins had a good time, but they weren't clingy or upset when he had to leave. They hugged him goodbye and asked when he'd visit again, but then went back to playing happily. It showed me that they were emotionally secure and not desperately seeking their father's approval. Jake's consistency. Over the next year, Jake visited once a month and never missed a video call. He sent the twins' birthday and Christmas presents that were thoughtful but not extravagant. He asked about their interests, their friends, their school progress. More importantly, he never tried to undermine my parenting or push for more time than I was comfortable giving. He respected the boundaries I'd set and seemed genuinely focused on being a positive presence in the twins' lives rather than trying to win them over or make up for lost time inappropriately. The family's attempts. Meanwhile, Jake's family was desperately trying to reach me. Robert sent letters begging for forgiveness and offering money. Sarah called from different numbers trying to get through to me. Even Carol, despite her earlier defiant call, sent a formal apology letter through a lawyer. They all wanted to meet their grandchildren and niece/nephew. They claimed they'd learned from their mistakes and just wanted a chance to be family. Robert's letters were particularly pathetic, saying he was ashamed of what they'd done and that he missed the grandchildren he'd never gotten to know. I threw away every letter and blocked every number. These people had destroyed my life based on lies, watched me struggle as a single mother, and allowed their innocent grandchildren to grow up without extended family support. I had no interest in their guilt-driven attempts at reconciliation. My new relationship. About a year after reconnecting with Jake, I met David, a wonderful man who was also a single parent. He was understanding about my complicated situation and got along well with the twins. We took our relationship slowly, but it developed into something beautiful. David never tried to replace Jake as the twins' father or compete with him. He understood his role in our lives and was supportive of the twins having a relationship with their biological father. Jake, to his credit, was respectful of my new relationship and never made things awkward. The twins adored David and started calling him their stepdad after we got engaged. They now had multiple father figures in their lives, which felt like a blessing after years of having none. Jake's continued growth. Jake continued to be consistent and reliable. He started therapy to deal with his guilt and the family dysfunction that had led to our situation. He was working on himself and seemed genuinely committed to being a better person and father. When the twins turned 7, he asked if he could take them for a weekend visit to his city. It was a big step, and I was nervous, but he'd proven himself trustworthy over nearly 2 years of consistent contact. The twins were excited about the adventure. The weekend went well. Jake was responsible and attentive, and the twins came home with stories about their fun activities. They weren't upset about leaving him or overly clingy when they returned, which told me they felt secure in both relationships. Current situation. It's been 3 years since the truth came out, and our situation has stabilized into something that works for everyone. Jake sees the twins regularly and has become a genuinely positive presence in their lives. He pays substantial child support and contributes to their expenses without me having to ask. The twins, now 8 years old, are thriving. They have 2 parents who love them, a stepfather who adores them, and a stable, happy home. They know their story in age-appropriate terms and understand that their family looks different from some others, but that doesn't bother them. I've completed my business degree and started my own consulting firm, which is doing well. David and I got married last year in a small ceremony that Jake respectfully stayed away from, though he congratulated us and sent a thoughtful gift. Why I'm writing this? So why am I writing this now? Because Jake's family has been ramping up their efforts to reconnect. Carol's cancer came back, and she's apparently telling everyone she wants to make things right before she dies. Robert has been calling Jake, begging him to convince me to let them meet their grandchildren. Emma, who I've maintained limited contact with because she was the one who told me the truth, says the family is desperate and that Carol is genuinely remorseful now. She thinks I should consider letting them have some relationship with the twins, especially since they're getting older and might want to know their extended family. Jake has stayed out of it, saying it's entirely my decision and that he supports whatever I choose. But I can tell he's conflicted. Part of him wants his children to have grandparents and aunts, even if those people are flawed. My current dilemma: the twins have started asking about grandparents and extended family. Their friends talk about grandmas and grandpas, and they want to know why they don't have any. I've told them that some families are smaller and that the people who love them are what matter, but they're curious. I'm torn between protecting my children from people who destroyed their mother and potentially depriving them of family relationships. Carol, Robert, and Sarah have sent letters directly to the twins, which infuriated me. They're trying to manipulate children to get what they want, just like they manipulated Jake years ago. But I also wonder if I'm being too harsh. The twins are older now and could potentially handle relationships with their extended family. Maybe supervised visits could work. Maybe Carol's illness has genuinely changed her perspective. My decision: after much consideration and therapy, I've decided to maintain my boundaries. Here's why. Carol has reached out to me multiple times over the years, and only once did she offer a genuine apology. Every other contact has been manipulative or self-serving. Even her deathbed confession was only shared because Emma couldn't live with the secret, not because Carol volunteered the truth. Robert and Sarah stood by and watched an innocent woman struggle with newborn twins while knowing she'd done nothing wrong. They let their grandchildren grow up without family support based on lies they helped perpetuate. Their regret now doesn't undo the damage they caused. Most importantly, these people have shown they're willing to use children as pawns to get what they want. Sending letters directly to my 8-year-old twins, trying to make them feel sorry for grandparents they've never met, is manipulative and wrong. The twins' perspective. I've been honest with the twins about their extended family in age-appropriate ways. I've told them that their daddy's family lives far away and that there were some disagreements between the grown-ups that happened before they were born. I've explained that sometimes families don't get along, but that doesn't mean anyone is bad. The twins have asked if they can meet their grandparents, and I've told them that maybe someday when they're older, they can make that choice for themselves. For now, they seem satisfied with their current family structure and don't seem to feel like they're missing out on anything. Jake's family's escalation. Recently, Jake's family has escalated their efforts. Robert hired a lawyer to explore his grandparents' rights, though he was told he has no legal standing since he's never had a relationship with the children. Carol has been posting on social media about her stolen grandchildren and how I'm keeping them from her out of spite. Sarah has been reaching out to my professional contacts, trying to find ways to pressure me. She actually called my business, pretending to be a potential client, just to get me on the phone so she could beg for a chance to meet the twins. This behavior reinforces my decision to keep them away from my children. People who are genuinely sorry don't harass and stalk the people they've wronged. They don't try to manipulate children or interfere with someone's livelihood. Moving forward, I've told Jake that his family's behavior is unacceptable and that if it continues, it will affect his relationship with the twins. He's assured me that he's told them to stop, but clearly, they're not listening to him either. I've had to involve my lawyer to send cease and desist letters. I've documented all their attempts to contact me and the twins. If necessary, I'll pursue restraining orders to protect my family's peace. The twins are thriving, and I won't let Jake's toxic family disrupt that. They had their chance to be loving grandparents and family members, and they chose instead to destroy an innocent woman's life. The consequences of those choices are theirs to live with. Final thoughts. I don't hate Jake anymore. He was manipulated by people he trusted, and while that doesn't excuse his actions, I understand how it happened. He's worked hard to rebuild his relationship with his children and has proven himself to be a good father now. But his family is a different story. They made deliberate, calculated choices to hurt me and deprive the twins of their mother's love and stability. They watched me struggle and suffer, knowing I was innocent, and did nothing. That level of cruelty isn't something I can forgive or forget. The twins will grow up knowing they're loved and wanted. They have a mother who fought for them, a biological father who's working to make amends, and a stepfather who chose to love them. They have a community of friends and chosen family who support them. They don't need the toxic drama and manipulation that comes with Jake's biological family. Maybe someday, when they're adults, they can choose for themselves whether to have relationships with those people. But for now, my job is to protect them and give them the stable, loving childhood they deserve. So, ATA for refusing to let my ex-husband's family back into our lives after they destroyed my marriage with lies and manipulation? I honestly don't think I am, but the constant pressure and guilt-tripping makes me second-guess myself sometimes. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.